In March 2025, the US lit the fuse on another trade war. Overnight, a flood of new tariffs reshaped the cost of cars, food, steel, everything from coffee beans to circuit boards. President Trump called it economic liberation. Critics warned it could spark a global crisis. But this wasn't the beginning of America's tariff battles, and it probably won't be the end. For over 2 centuries, tariffs have shaped the geography of American power, fueling economic booms in one region while igniting political revolt in another. From the cotton fields of the Deep South to the steel towns of the Midwest, trade policy has always drawn hard lines on the American map. This is the story of how tariffs and the fight over them became a uniquely geographic struggle, not just about money, but about place, and why every time America wages a trade war, it also risks a civil one. At its core, a tariff is simple. It's a tax on goods coming in from abroad, but when you look at who benefits from that tax and who doesn't, it gets complicated fast. And this is because America's economy has never been evenly distributed. In the early 1800s, the North was industrializing with factories, textiles, and ironworks, while the South was exporting massive volumes of cotton and tobacco. The West was expanding into frontier economies of timber, fur, and agriculture. And Congress, facing pressures from all three, passed one of the most controversial tariffs in US history, the Tariff of 1828, nicknamed by its critics the Tariff of Abominations. It raised duties to nearly 50%, mostly to protect northern manufacturers from cheaper British goods. But in the South, where the economy depended on exporting raw cotton and importing finished goods, the tariff was seen as a direct attack. South Carolina, under John C. Calhoun's leadership, declared the right to nullify federal law. Andrew Jackson threatened military force, and the crisis was only diffused by the Compromise Tariff of 1833. But the message was clear: trade policy could tear the country apart. The pattern would repeat. Tariffs became geographic. Protective policies backed by the industrial North would often alienate the agrarian South and West. The Morrill Tariff of 1861, passed just before the Civil War, symbolized Northern economic dominance and deepened Southern fears about political marginalization. The West was caught in between. Some states wanted protection for wool or mining, others needed cheap manufactured tools and foreign capital. As settlers pushed westward, tariff politics followed them, changing with each new boomtown or rail line. By the 1830s and the 1860s, tariffs weren't just about shaping industry, they were redrawing the national fault lines. By the end of the 19th century, the Civil War had come and gone, but tariff battles had only escalated. The McKinley Tariff of 1890 raised rates to nearly 50% again, this time to protect the booming industries of the Northeast and Midwest. Pennsylvania steel, Ohio glass, Boston textiles, these sectors now defined the Republican strongholds. For them, tariffs were a lifeline. But for Southern and plain farmers, it was economic suffocation. The price of manufactured goods rose while global demand for their crops declined. Cotton farmers in Alabama and wheat producers in Kansas alike found themselves squeezed. The Populist Party surged in response, accusing Washington of rigging trade policy to benefit Eastern elites. The divide deepened with the Ford-Macomber Tariff of 1922, which hiked duties even further. By the 1920s, the United States had some of the highest tariff walls in the world, and global tensions simmered. And then came the crash. In 1930, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff imposed duties on over 20,000 goods, just as the Great Depression hit. U.S. exports dropped by 61% from 1929 to 1933. Canada retaliated by slapping tariffs on U.S. fruits and lumber. France and Britain raised duties on American cars and machinery. Latin American buyers turned to European trade partners. Ports in Baltimore and New Orleans emptied. Wheat sat unsold in the Dakotas. Midwest factories shut down, not from lack of protection, but for lack of customers. Smoot-Hawley didn't cause the Great Depression, but it turned a recession into a global collapse, and it proved a brutal lesson. Protectionism can backfire when the world hits back. In 1934, the U.S. shifted course. The Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act allowed the president to lower tariffs in exchange for access to foreign markets. It marked the beginning of a new era, less about walls, more about deals. But the scars remained. Every tariff left behind a new geography of winners and losers. In 2018, trade wars came back. President Trump imposed sweeping tariffs on steel and aluminum. A trade war with China followed, targeting everything from electronics to soybeans. The US justified the move using national security clauses from the 1960s, a sharp break from decades of multilateral trade norms. In the Rust Belt, there was optimism. Steel mills in Illinois and Ohio reopened. Employment in some plants rose 9%. Towns that had weathered decades of decline saw a glimmer of hope. But just across the region in the Corn Belt, the mood was different. China responded by halting purchases of soybeans, which had accounted for nearly $14 billion in U.S. exports. Iowa alone lost over $1 billion in soybeans revenue. Grain elevators overflowed. Some farmers watched years of margins disappear in months. Federal bailouts totaled $28 billion by 2020, nearly double the auto industry rescue of 2008. Many farmers accepted the help, others resented the instability. California growers were also hit. China and the EU imposed retaliatory tariffs on almonds, wine, and citrus. Tech companies faced rising costs on components and servers. By 2019, over 1,400 US companies had requested exemptions. In 2025, the trade war expanded again. March brought back steel and auto tariffs, 25% across the board. April brought Liberation Day, a 10% universal tariff on all imports and higher rates for key rivals. China was hit with 34%, the EU with 20%, Japan with 24%. The geography of impact was immediate. Midwestern states with steel plants like Indiana and Pennsylvania saw increased hirings, but farmers and food processors in Wisconsin and Nebraska braced for some export pain. Ports like Long Beach and Savannah saw delays. Retailers warned of price increases, particularly in lower cost goods. And retaliation came fast. China resumed tariffs on soybeans and pork, the EU targeted bourbon, motorcycles, and orange juice, Canada levied tariffs on ketchup, aluminum, and construction nails, and Mexico targeted pork, cheese, and potatoes. These weren't just economic moves, they were strategic hits on politically sensitive regions. In some cases, foreign governments appeared to target products from Republican-leaning districts. The trade war had become a political map. For as long as America has existed, it's been negotiating a balance between protection and openness, between making and selling, between industry and agriculture, and always between regions. Tariffs have never landed evenly. They've created winners and losers, built fortunes and fueled revolts, shaped cities and emptied farms. And more than any economic textbook might admit, they've helped draw the political map of America, one tax at a time. Because tariffs are never just about trade, they're about geography. They're about who gets hurt and who gets hurt when the borders get a price tag. And in every trade war, that price is always paid by someone, somewhere.